An unfamiliar ally, a privileged brother, the friend that sees eye to eye, or one that doesn't at all. Maybe it's someone you despise, or someone with justified pride. These are all extremely different relationships, but are connected by a single character archetype, rivals. Not just two individuals out to better each other, but rather an amalgamation of interconnected feelings towards one another. A relationship built off of complexity and ambivalence. A well-crafted rivalry does more than just entertain. A writer can utilize this to create a counterpoint to their main character. I think the best stories come from points where the main character faces adversity through an opposing ideology. And if character foils aren't compelling enough, it could be a reason that many would drop a series. But what if I told you there exists a rivalry so complex that it makes you want to stop watching? A character that's cut from the same cloth of pride and brazen enough to challenge the main character and even humiliate them. Julius from ReZero isn't a typical rival you would find in the average shonen series. Coming from an already untraditional story, ReZero does something that we see time and time again with its character foils. It undermines stereotypical relationships. And in this case, it makes our rival the hero in the hero's story. What's up internet, I'm Nikando, and welcome to a series I like to call ReZero Deep Dives. And today I want to take a look at how a character's most flawed relationship might just be its best. ReZero is a show that constantly portrays the state of human emotion, to portray themes of love and nuanced mental health. But these aren't the only types of themes given to us. For example, in an extreme hyperbolic scenario, we get to see how low effort can affect your mental state, or how insecurity can break apart a strongly forged relationship. A lot of what makes a story good is the primary character that it's built around, so any action that a character takes changes the story in some way. But not a lot of writers make their main character act out of line or make them do something the viewer wouldn't like. And when they do, they barely reap the consequences of their actions. This is what makes Subaru one of the best MCs in fiction, because after the second arc of ReZero, Subaru is living off of an all-time high. And when this gets to his head, it creates one of the biggest crash and burn sequences unlike anything I've ever seen in fiction. So let's talk how we got here. At some point in my last video, I mentioned that ReZero is about how insecurities get the better of you and how to get the better of those insecurities. After Subaru is living off of an insane high, we see the former rule take effect in the capital. The author introduces Julius as a way to distinguish each character's pride as a foil. For Subaru, this happens to be his arrogance as a self-proclaimed knight, which is driven by his own insecurity. Subaru has no titles, no real skills to speak of, and desperately seeks validation, whereas Julius's pride serves a much more practical use, cut from being respected, skilled, and composed. There are a bunch of different ways throughout all three seasons that he interacts with Subaru, but his main purpose stems from being a catalyst that unsheaths Subaru's mask in a very disrespectful way. So let me ask you this as the viewer, was Julius right, wrong, or was his judgment something else entirely? Well, Julius is at the epicenter of one of the most unbearable scenes in ReZero. But before I talk about that, I would like to touch up on the emotional gap between our two characters. ReZero explores the idea of what it would actually be like if a real-life human was transported to a fantasy world. And Subaru as a character hasn't adjusted to the cultural norms or has met another knight besides Reinhardt, and that's an exception. So it's understandable that a clash of ideals was bound to happen. The royal selection really doubles down on the idea of that this story won't change for the main character. And Julius's character is used to show how serious the circumstances are and develop the world's status. He represents a cornerstone of Lagunica and is there to tell Subaru that you aren't the main character. And Julius's pride takes over when he recognizes that Subaru acknowledges his own weaknesses. Beneath his composure lies an interesting paradox. Julius's pride is built around something deeply personal. He values dignity, honor, and reputation because they mask his own inner fears, ones of inadequacy and loneliness. His pride isn't arrogance, it's protection. And the royal selection contextualizes these two characters so that they have a common ground in a trait that distinguishes them. I think that the defining trait of Julius that makes him so entertaining to watch is his pompous demeanor. This is where Julius's writing can get tricky as he comes off as many different things to the audience. Something that I've consistently took note of throughout my life of understanding fiction is that good character writing can oftentimes send the wrong messages. A lot of characters can be liked because they follow some kind of trope, whether that be the strongest, a badass antihero, or an overzealous side character. To a typical viewer, if a character falls under one of these tropes that they like, then it's fair to say that they will most likely enjoy them. But if you apply this rule to someone like Julius or Subaru, it's not as black and white, because they aren't characters that can be classified as stereotypes as their actions are too multidimensional to come across one way. The episode's self-proclaimed knight, Subaru Natsuki, is the spot in the anime where people drop the series the most, and it's not hard to understand why this is the case. Who people thought a character once was turned out to be someone completely different. Tappei took the risk of doing this to his own main character, as well as a newly introduced rival. And while Julius's actions might have been just, his added pompousness is presented in a way that might just be enough to make him disagreeable. And that's the beauty of this rivalry, because while Julius might cause complications to the story, the humiliation in their duel later on in that episode is the event that shapes both of their characters. This scene is very important when comparing Subaru and Julius because now we can see why they're cut from the same cloth. Both are men with an insurmountable amount of pride seeking validation in their current circumstances. They're both characters cut from a streak of insecurity, visible or not. The duel scene doesn't exist just to be deliberate and hard to watch. It's more than necessary to build such a difficult relationship from two people who never should have gotten along in the first place. Because pride and humility is ever changing on a scale that needs to be balanced. Subaru would have never realized that his current mindset was wrong, and Julius would have never understood humility or a different perspective. But what gets you is that despite setting up a scene that was difficult to watch, the payoff was more than worth it. When given an original protagonist and combine it with an untraditional rival, it in turn becomes a formula to create a beautiful bond. One of the first instances we see this in is Julius insisting on a mock duel rather than a formal punishment by death, which is an interesting takeaway from the writer because Julius inadvertently protects Subaru. See this as some kind of foreshadow for their future relationship, but this is the first instance that ties into the rest of Season 1. Subaru's resentment of Julius lies in a couple places: his envy of Julius's actual knight status, and the differences in how they see knighthood. And because Subaru sees knighthood this way, in Julius's eyes, that makes him a fool. Which is ironic because the royal capital parliament acknowledged Subaru's sentiments. And when Julius puts him in his place, Subaru loses everything. He has every reason to despise him, but he doesn't. After Subaru goes through all his trauma and realizes that he's wrong, the next time he sees Julius, they just laugh, and the weight of both of their actions is exemplified when they both take a ride with one another.
It was all my fault. Sorry. I apologize.
As do I. Genuinely. I can't take back my words and actions, but I want to make amends from the bottom of my heart for belittling you the way I did.
It becomes something truly heartwarming. We find an apology that is a significant moment for their character development. But what I specifically like about this is that after their interaction, there still remains ambivalent feelings between them. They're forced allies. I think the importance between two good rivals is the way that both characters react to one another. Being buddy-buddy instantly with the man that made you lose everything isn't a realistic take. Subaru's relationship with Julius from here on out is a very interesting perspective. I think it adds a lot of realism to already realistic characters. For someone like Subaru who is similar to us, it's hard for him to bite the bullet and accept Julius. Hell, he has a hard time accepting himself. But just like any human, he continues to learn. And watching Season 3 further solidifies this idea. Seeing Subaru and Julius be envious of one another is still fascinating. I myself was so uninterested in Julius's character as he was being introduced. But in traditional fashion, ReZero made him memorable and even reminded me of some of the people in my own life. I think a lot of people have that person who challenges us, pushes our buttons, or even highlights our own insecurities. But those same interactions can become powerful opportunities for growth if we're willing to face our imperfections honestly. I think that both Subaru and Julius teach us something universal, that real strength and genuine friendship often come from recognizing not just others' worth, but our own capacity for change. It makes you wonder, why do I want to keep some of these people around if they just oppose me or are nothing like me? A relationship like that can turn people away from the things that they're running from themselves. Because a lot of ReZero has these complex relationships that help Subaru realize his own shortcomings and flaws. And his willingness to change himself shows how Julius and Subaru end up becoming friends. And there's this mutual respect and camaraderie between the two as the first season ends and goes forward. Had Subaru not tried to overlook what they went through in the past and changed himself, the first step towards real friendship and growth would have never happened. I think that this is the essence of humanization, and their dynamic embodies this. All the while teaching us how to be accepting, to change, and most of all, understand each other.